Thanks everybody for joining me and to CRRF for inviting me to present today. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the support of my advisor, Dr. Sarah Wolf at Royal Roads, my committee member, Dr. Chris Ling, the university, and my lab mates at Dr. Wolf's C-Lab. I'd like to also thank my study participants who provided most of the photos and content that you're going to see in this presentation. Planning for effective and equitable land use in rural residential communities poses unique challenges for municipalities, especially within the context of globalization and climate change. For planners, one of the challenges in trying to protect rural areas is this difficulty in defining the term rural character. If we don't know what it means, how are we supposed to preserve it or maintain it? In my study, I proposed that the way a person defines rural values and character really depends not just on physical landscape features necessarily, but also on social, emotional, and demographic dimensions. So I chose two Southern Vancouver Island communities called Metchosin and North Saanich to focus my research on. Compared with other quote-unquote rural areas in Canada, such as Manitoba, this area might seem more suburban in nature to a lot of you. However, large areas in both Metchosin and North Saanich remain within the BC's agricultural land reserve, and a lot of the local farming that happens does take place in these two communities. These municipalities are distinct from one another, but they do share some of the same challenges. Mainly the tension between the demand for services and also the desire to defend against encroachment from nearby Victoria. And this is often articulated as a need to preserve rural values and character. So I really wanted to know what rural values and character actually means. And I had a feeling it was really going to depend on who I asked. And that led me to my research question, which was, how do residents' identity, attachments, and demographic characteristics influence potentially contentious and varied personal definitions of rural values and character? So from a theoretical standpoint, I believe that the complexity of human-place relationships is best understood using a relational paradigm. And this position assumes that the circumstances, environment, and relationships within a given system are going to directly influence the values, behaviors, and perceptions of the individuals within that system. And so terms like rural values and character can be thought of as situated relational values that cannot be objectively defined. I used surveys to generate quantitative data, and then I supplemented that data with qualitative methods to capture nuance and allow for the possibility of new insights. My research design positioned participant definitions of rural values and character as that relational value. I had 116 people participate in my survey, and this slide shows some of that dimensional breakdown. A couple of interesting points to call out here. Most of the participants in my study were homeowners. Renters were far more likely to be full-time farmers, which really speaks to the correlation to the land values in the area. The land in the area where I live costs way too much to make farming economical if you are the person who owns the land. More participants from Metchosin were farming, and over a third of my participants had lived in their study area for over 31 years. In addition to demographic surveys, I also gave my participants a list of 9 phrases, which you'll see down the left-hand side of the slide there. And I wanted people to arrange them in descending order of significance to how they themselves would define rural values and character. Probably, like, unsurprisingly, out of those 116 lists that I got back, 114 of them were arranged differently. We had 2 that were the same. However, despite the different configurations, I did find some patterns and some trends in certain preferences. So I took each of those 116 lists, and then I calculated the instances a given phrase appeared in each ranking position across the whole sample. And you can see from the yellow highlighted boxes which phrases appeared most frequently in a given ranking position. And then I broke the sample down after this into demographic groups because I wanted to look for perceptual trends among and between certain groups. So the biggest difference I noticed between genders, which was really interesting, was that men seemed to prioritize social and emotional phrases higher. So things like feeling safe, like-minded neighbors, and community connection, while women actually had a stronger association to aesthetic or physical things like low density and natural wild areas. I analyzed the top 3 phrases according to participants' residence in their early life, so just basically whether or not they had grown up on the Southern Vancouver Island. The non-local people, they tended to prioritize natural wild areas in their definition, whereas the local people prioritized feeling safe. And this suggests to me that where someone was raised is going to influence their perception of the current community character or the landscape. I also looked for differences between working and retired people. The working people associated rural character with a rustic lifestyle more than retired people did. Working people also prioritized feeling safe more than the retired people. And then I looked at differences between the 2 study areas to see if there was anything different. Natural wild areas was a higher priority phrase for the Metchosin residents than the North Saanich residents. And this might be because North Saanich contains more services and subdivisions and is a little bit more mixed use. So my goal with collecting qualitative data was to allow people to elaborate on their survey answers if they wanted to. It was just optional, while accommodating the possibility that new or unanticipated insights might come up. I got 75 people who chose to submit qualitative. So I analyzed and coded those responses by broad themes that I noticed that related both to the data insights from the surveys as well as like sociocultural issues that I had noted in the literature. In North Saanich, the participants expressed diverging perspectives on whether or not their community could even be considered rural. Some descriptions, as you can see from the slide, some descriptions sort of contradicted others within the same community. 3 participants qualified their perspectives by comparing the place where they grew up with North Saanich to either sort of defend or challenge that rural label. 4 North Saanich participants kind of defined rurality vis-a-vis an agricultural landscape with farming activities. This could offer some insight into that misalignment among residents as to what actually constitutes a rural landscape, because farming was not high on everybody's list. 12 participants used the open-ended question to raise concerns about perceived cultural changes taking place in their community. Though social class was not referenced in those 9 phrases that I showed people, it appeared that for a lot of participants, rurality has become associated with affluence in these areas. And these sentiments could also explain more of the friction within both study areas regarding housing affordability and housing accessibility. Some of the participants expressed concern that rural values and character is a phrase that's being co-opted by elites to keep places for themselves. And this person said, or one person said, "I think rural has become a code for gatekeeping, acting like others don't belong or deserve to be here." Written submissions suggested some participants also perceived a zero-sum game that kind of pit housing, rural character, and environmental conservation in like a conflict for what matters most and to who. Some participants used really emotional words like heartbreaking, disappointed, sad to muse about the changes they observed, while other people used rational arguments to support their positions, saying things like, well, if we add density in North Saanich, it will increase energy requirements for transportation. And someone else said, not every municipality needs to provide every housing type. So for the photos, I had a total of 25 people who chose to upload a photo to go along with their survey. And this data was really interesting to me. It provided this kind of visual element of that multidimensional nature of perceptions of place, place value, and in this case, the rural environment specifically in this region. The agriculture group pictures, I called them, depicted traditional kind of farm landscapes, kids with grown-ups in a food garden, sheep, chickens, produce, kind of reflecting what I thought to be the social and emotional elements in some of the values phrases relating to community, family, care for the environment. Then I had some pictures that I coded natural, which showed native plants, birds, wilderness landscapes, a beach, as you can see, mostly characteristic of that natural geography in the area, no pictures of people, kind of maybe invoking that sense of peace that seemed to score really highly on a lot of people's lists. And then finally, there was this category I just called other, because it was pictures that didn't really fit clearly as agricultural or natural, like the poodle with the snow on his paws. Those pictures seemed like they were really meaningful, but I didn't know what they meant, and I wished that I had a mechanism to follow up with participants, but it was all anonymized, so that's something I would do differently next time. In Metchosin and North Saanich, this study found that there is no cohesive definition of rural values and character. Findings from those 9 phrases ranked analysis indicated that though there were some consistent patterns among and between demographic groups, individual perceptions of rural values and character still varied, sometimes really starkly. My qualitative data revealed local tensions and values conflicts between housing supply, the preservation of agricultural areas, and environmental concerns, issues with profound implications on the South Island, the broader region, and beyond. The competing issues of housing needs, agricultural preservation, climate change, and environmental management have placed the South Island's rural residential communities under immense pressure. Governments, municipalities, and planning departments need knowledge and tools to move through conflicts and reach solutions that will allow communities to grow and thrive sustainably. My data assessment revealed both challenges and opportunities within land use planning and community engagement. This potential for conflict, though, is really illustrated in examples where a feature like views of farms, farm animals, and fields come first on one person's list and like dead last on another's. Another example, like if housing supply is a regional priority, which it really is, but residents are divided on their sensitivity to densification as a threat to rural values and character, is there a way to accommodate additional housing units without eroding natural wild areas and peacefulness? One potential solution to this could be to identify features with broader consensus, such as natural wild areas, and then use those as sort of like guiding principles, and then consider priorities like the need for housing within the context of those guiding principles. Goodwill can be encouraged when residents have opportunities to discover where their values and principles overlap, rather than focusing solely on their differences. So it's my hope that this work will be helpful for future planning in Metchosin and North Saanich, while also complementing the growing body of literature on rural residential communities grappling with landscape change. Thank you.